When you start doing body weight exercise, one of the first things you're going to notice is that your wrists are taking a lot of the burden, especially during pushing exercises. And last week, I got a lot of great feedback in the comments. I really appreciate that. And one of the most common questions I got is, hey, what can I do to strengthen my wrists and my hands for a lot of these exercises? So in this video, I'm going to show you how to prehab your wrists, meaning strengthen them and prepare them for the exercises that lie ahead. Real quick before we get started, I want to explain the difference between rehabilitation and prehabilitation. So rehab or rehabilitation is when you're strengthening and improving the mobility for a joint or muscle after an injury. This is to help with recovery so you can get back to normal functionality. Then there's prehabilitation or prehab as it's called. You're going to strengthen and improve the mobility of a joint or muscle in advance, all right, in preparation to avoid an injury in the future. And that's what this video is all about, all right? You're going to be doing a lot of pushing exercises and pulling exercises, both of which will affect your wrists. And if you plan ahead and you build strength in your wrists and stretch them and improve the mobility, then you can avoid injuries in the future. First, let's learn all the different movements of the wrists. When you move at the wrists so that your palm moves down towards your forearm, that's called flexion. This is a very common wrist movement in calisthenics, especially when it comes to pulling exercises. Now, when it comes to any kind of pushing exercise, such as push-ups, frog stands, handstands, you're going to be an extension like this. An extension is when the back of your hand moves towards your forearm. When your hand is sideways, there's different movements introduced, this one being called ulnar deviation. This is in reference to the ulna bone, which is the bone in your forearm on the side with your little finger. And when you do the opposite and you raise your hand so it's tilting in the direction of your thumb, it's called radial deviation, and this is in reference to the radius bone in your forearm. And lastly, there's rotations. So supine is when palms are up, prone is when palms are down. So by just rotating at the wrist like this, you're switching between pronation and supination. So let me show you a quick 5-minute wrist routine you can do to build strength and mobility in your wrists, and we'll start with some mobility exercises. First, we'll start off with wrist circles. So place your palms together, elbows close together, clasp the fingers, and then start rotating at the wrists in a circle. I recommend doing this at a medium to fast pace. You might feel some cracking and popping in the wrist joint at first, but as you warm up and blood starts flowing to the joints, you'll feel that it loosens up and heats up a little bit. The whole purpose of the wrist circles is to warm up your wrist joints. And if you don't like doing the wrist circles with your hands together, you can also do them separate like this. Next, I recommend doing what's called chops. To do chops, you clasp the fingers together, but you move in ulnar and radial deviation back and forth like this. So bringing your thumbs to the forearm and then your pinkies to the forearm. Again, if you don't like doing this with your hands together, you can do them separate and alternating like this. So you alternate one hand up, one hand down, back and forth. This will do the same thing. It's going to warm up the muscles and connective tissue that are responsible for ulnar and radial deviation. Once your wrists are nice and warmed up, it's time to do some stretching. We're going to start off with light stretches like this prayer stretch. With your palms together, let your elbows kind of rise up and your hands sink down. This is going to put a lot of emphasis on extension, but it's going to be a light stretch compared to what we'll be doing later. Then do the inverted prayer, which is when the backs of your hands are together and your elbows are sinking downwards with gravity. This stretch focuses on flexion, and I recommend doing both of these prayer stretches for about 20 seconds. Next, we'll go a little deeper with the stretches. So sit with your legs out in front of you, fingers pointed forward and your hands right behind your butt. Pressing into the ground like this will stretch extension, then you can roll forward into flexion. Keep rolling back and forth between the extension and the flexion, pressing hard into the ground or as hard as you comfortably can for several seconds. I like going back and forth between these two seated stretches probably for about 30 to 60 seconds or so. I really don't count, until I feel ready for even deeper stretching. And for the deeper stretches, we're going to get into a kneeling position. So kneel with your hands flat on the floor, palms down, fingers forward and just sort of lean your shoulders a little bit ahead of your wrists. As you lean the shoulders forward, you're going to feel a deep stretch in the extension, all right? So be gentle with this, don't go too hard at first, and then switch to backs of your hands down on the floor, and then lean backwards. Shoulders should be behind the wrists, and this will stretch flexion. I like holding each stretch just for about 5 to 10 seconds and switching back and forth between them at first. This is a great way to ease into the deep stretches and, further warm up your wrists before moving on to the strengthening exercises. And real quick, I want to point out one alternative. You can put the palms of your hands down flat on the floor with fingers pointed back towards your body. And then if you lean backwards slightly, shoulders slightly behind the wrists, you're going to also feel a different type of extension stretch, right? So this is just an alternative you can try if you want. Okay, now that we're all warmed up and did some stretching, it's time for strengthening. So start off on your knees, place your palms flat on the floor, fingers pointing straight ahead, and as you're kneeling, lean forward like we did before in the stretching. The difference is this time you're going to concentrate on a really far lean and you're going to hold it as long as you can. So you're going to hold this wrist extension, pressing hard into the floor with your shoulders to build up strength in the wrists, and once you're able to do it for 20 to 30 seconds, then you'll be ready to move on to the next progression. The next progression for strength is to come up on your toes so you're in a straight arm plank. Again, lean forward so your shoulders are ahead of your wrists. Again, you're going to want to hold this position for as long as you can to gradually build up strength, and then eventually you'll be able to hold it for 20 to 30 seconds and move on to push-ups. By doing push-ups with your shoulders ahead of the wrists, you'll be putting extra strain on the wrists and further building their strength. I recommend building these up until you're doing at least 10 or 12 slow controlled push-ups with your shoulders ahead of the wrists, and then you'll be ready to move on to the next phase for strength. So again, you're going to be kneeling, but this time you're going to put your knuckles down on the floor. Make sure you have a soft floor, something like a mat or carpeting, to sort of cushion a little bit, because it'll be a little painful in the beginning. But you want all your weight coming straight down on your fists. This will really help with building strength in the wrists and hands. And once you can hold that position for 20 to 30 seconds, come up on your toes and do a straight arm plank on your fists. Now when you're doing fist exercises like this, there's no need to lean forward, just let all of your weight come straight down from your shoulders onto your hands and wrists. And then it's time for fist push-ups. By doing full push-ups, slow and controlled, on your knuckles like this, it's going to build plenty of strength in your hands, wrists, and forearms, so you'll have no problems doing frog stands, handstands, planches, anything that puts a lot of demand on your wrists. And one last variation I want to show you is when you put your fists down on the floor, you can put them down in a neutral position, meaning palms facing each other. Alright, your thumbs would be facing out towards the wall in front of you. Doing push-ups in this neutral position is going to help build strength for ulnar and radial deviation, meaning the sides of your wrists. And that's really going to translate well to parallel bar work, whether it's on parallettes or on a dip station, anything like that. And for those of you who prefer a written routine, here it is in case you want to pause your screen and jot it down. And by looking at the timings, you can see this will only take about 5 minutes, so add it to your warm-up on upper body days. So there you go, that's a simple wrist routine you can do before every upper body workout. It'll warm up your wrists and prepare you for that workout, but also it'll strengthen your wrists in the long run to avoid injury. And with that said, if you are new to my channel, minus the gym, it's all about calisthenics-based home fitness and healthy eating. So if that sounds up your alley, make sure you check out my back catalog of videos, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll put a button right up here in the corner. All right? And I'll talk to you later.